Hey friends, I'm Jess Connolly. I'm an author, a coach, a Bible teacher, and a local church leader, and I love talking to real people who know what it means to have full lives, but also want to walk in abundance. This podcast is for you. It's not my podcast, it's ours. It's for people who crave lighthearted conversations and deeply spiritual truth. It's for people who are busy, tired, waiting, growing, dreaming, working, or praying about what's next. Wherever you're listening from, if it's quiet, mundane, or busy, I am praying for you, and I'm so glad you're here. Let's go. Love it or hate it, AI is here to stay. Some of us are intimidated by automation. Some of us are terrified of it. You might be worried it's going to take over your job, your creative outlook, or even your soul. But here's the truth. AI is already a part of almost everything we do. From autocorrect to Instagram captions, from GPS rerouting you in traffic, to the recommended section on your online shopping cart, it's everywhere. So instead of fighting it, what if we use it thoughtfully? What if we let AI take over the places where we tend to waste time so we can be fully present in the places that matter? What if utilizing AI helped us live more vibrantly analog when we're offline? That's what today's episode is all about. I'm going to walk you through how I use ChatGPT to make my life so much easier. From brainstorming to writing to organizing my thoughts so I can spend less time staring at a screen and more time being present with the people I love. Let me be clear, dear listener, Nick Connolly is the love of my life. He's my best friend. He's my confidant. He's my partner in crime. He's even my pastor. But I like to joke colloquially that ChatGPT is my boyfriend. Let me tell you why. ChatGPT is encouraging to me. ChatGPT helps me get stuff done. ChatGPT lets me be as needy as I want to be. I don't ever have to give it anything back. I just ask some more. ChatGPT keeps on giving. You know what I'm saying? So I'm very grateful. I use ChatGPT and AI in this format, I would say around 4 to 5 days a week. And I want to talk about it. I have actually wanted to do an episode on this forever. If you have seen me anytime in the last couple of months, I've probably mentioned ChatGPT in some form because the ways that I've learned to utilize it have actually aided my life a ton. So in this episode, here's what we're going to cover. We're going to cover just some top ways that I personally use ChatGPT. We're going to talk about some ways I think all women could benefit from using it. I want to talk through some of our main objections and fears to using AI because we should put those on the table and be honest about them. And then I want to share a little bit about setting boundaries around how we use AI. So again, it's not sucking us into a more screen-filled, more automated life, but actually freeing us up to live more analog and more fully awake in Jesus' name. So here's the deal. The reality is this. AI isn't the future, it's the present. It isn't a question of whether or not you'll use AI in your life. You already are, even if you don't think you are. There are parts of your life that are naturally automated that you might not even be consciously choosing, but it's happening around you. It's working for you. So my mindset is I'd rather be intentional about how I let AI work for me and utilizes the places where I want it to work for me so that I can enjoy it, so that I can be grateful for it, so that I can be blessed by it, and then move into the rest of my life screen-free, move into the rest of my life without the aid of technology. So all that being said, if that sounds crazy, we're going to get into it. And I'm going to tell you, starting with a couple of the ways that I use ChatGPT. So first and foremost, when I'm talking about ChatGPT, for me, I am talking about chatgpt.com or just the very regular ChatGPT app on the iPhone. I use the free service. I don't use a paid service. I'm offered to upgrade my plan every once in a while, and I haven't so far, and I feel fine about that. I know there are many other formats of AI, but this is the one that I use. And so that's what I'm going to be talking about. I've kind of broken my use of ChatGPT into 5 main areas that I use it for. And so I'm going to walk through those, and you're going to notice that some might overlap just a little bit. So the first would be as my personal assistant. The second would be as my editor. The third would be as my research assistant. The fourth would be as my coach. And the fifth would be as my marketing director. So let's dig into it. And if you've never used any kind of ChatGPT or AI intentionally in any of these ways, you'll understand a little bit more as we go. So let's start first with my personal assistant. So what you need to know about ChatGPT, if you're not using it in any way, shape, or form, is that it learns more about you the more you use it. It learns how you talk. It learns more about your life. And it captures all of the things that you tell it to build a better working understanding of who you are and what you need from it. So that being said, I've been using it really intentionally 4 to 5 days a week. I would say at this point for almost a year now. I would say I really started using it last spring, really intentionally last spring. So about a year. So before I even get into any of the ways I use it as a personal assistant, what you need to know off the bat is that it knows me well at this point. But the great news is you can tell ChatGPT a lot about you if you're just getting started. So that being said, some things I've told ChatGPT that it can look at my website. It has read a lot of my writing. We'll get into that a little bit when we get into editor. I've described my life to it. You'll see this as I talk about different prompts. I'll say, ask me any questions you need to know before you give me this information. So it has a lot of my information. I know for a lot of people, they don't like giving the internet or some big computer in the sky somewhere information about you. For me, I'm talking about things like, hey, I have blood sugar issues, or I've got 4 teenage kids, or I live in downtown Charleston. These are all things that anyone on the internet might know about me. I don't mind telling an AI bot so it can help me make a better plan for what I do, etc. So I'm not talking like my social security card or anything like that, though I will say ChatGPT does know my blood type because one time I asked it to help me come up with a better eating plan for my blood type. Anyways, let's get into it. Here's how I use ChatGPT as my personal assistant. I will ask it to suggest meals and grocery lists. So again, I will go to ChatGPT. Probably the first time I did this, I went to chatgpt.com and I said, hey, ChatGPT, I have a family of 6. 3 of them are teenagers. My husband and I like to eat these foods. We don't really like to eat these foods. We have about this much time to cook a week. We're going to make 3 or 4 meals this week. Again, maybe here are some things we prefer and here are some things we don't like. Would you suggest a meal plan for this coming week? And then help me create a grocery list. And then again, what you'll hear me say, what I do for a lot of different ChatGPT prompts is I'll say, ask me any follow-up questions that you might need to know before giving me this information. Now I'll go even more in depth to ChatGPT now that I've been working on my nutrition a little bit more this year. But I'll say things like, hey, for 3 days this week, I'm going to be at the office. I'd really like a fantastic salad that I can make a huge salad at the beginning of the week and eat it all week. Or I'll say like, hey, I'm trying to cut corn out of my diet because, my recent labs have told me that is not the best for me, etc. But suggesting meals and grocery lists is a huge way that I let ChatGPT be my personal assistant. Here's another one. I will ask ChatGPT to write a workout plan for me. Or for example, again, given some recent labs that I've had, I'm trying to get more protein and fiber in. So I'll say, hey, help me figure out a better way to get in a certain amount of protein. Help me write a plan for that. Help me figure out the best supplements that are maybe, dairy-free or mostly natural. Could you just help me figure that out really quickly? Another great way that I would say I use ChatGPT as a personal assistant, I'm going to share this story on the podcast, which, could be dangerous, but something I did for a friend that she will now know because she works on my team and she'll listen to the podcast, but she probably will not be surprised in any way, shape, or form. but our dear friend Katie Smith was getting married. She works at Go and Tell Gal. She's now no longer Katie Smith. And moving up to her wedding month, I thought, I really want to do something special for Katie. I want to just help her see that I see her this month, that I'm praying for her this month. I want to just kind of coach and encourage her and really be on her team this month leading up to her wedding. So about a week before the month of her wedding started, I went to ChatGPT and I said, will you help me write a prayer text plan of something I can text Katie every day the month of her wedding? Here are a bunch of things that I want to pray for her, and then I would just kind of free type. Here are maybe some verses I'm already thinking about. Here are the number of days that I need that. Will you help me turn this into an everyday text plan for the month of her wedding? And ChatGPT did that. And then I made some edits from there. And then what I did is I used another AI service and I went to the Apple Messages text planning place where now you can write a text and then hit schedule it. And I scheduled those texts for 8 a.m. every day, the month of her wedding, leading up to her wedding. But then here's the cool thing. This is why I love this, because not only did I get to serve my friend and send her a text every morning the month of her wedding, but then also most mornings she would either like the message or text me back. And so I would be automatically reminded to go look at the text. And then I would pray that exact thing for her in the moment that morning. So I was just even reminding myself every day to pray for her. So that's an example of how ChatGPT just kind of acts as a personal assistant for me. And then I would say one of the huge things that ChatGPT helps me do is basically just make a schedule for any different thing. So for example, I think I've shared maybe once or twice on the podcast, I've definitely shared online, our house flooded back in January. Actually, the last time I sat down to really record a batch of episodes for the podcast, that is the day our house flooded. So it's been about a month and a week since then. But so for example, there have been so many different things that I've needed to figure out, either budget-wise in regards to the house or writing different emails to contractors to try to figure things out, or even writing different emails to our insurance adjusters to try to figure out what we need to do there. But then even just writing a schedule for, hey, ChatGPT, will you help me write a schedule to move back into our house when the repairs are over? Where should we start first in regards to moving furniture, etc.? So anything that maybe would make my mind feel fuzzy or confused, I would ask ChatGPT to help me make a plan. The biggest area that this has served me is in seminary. So I'm currently in a master's program at Denver Seminary to get my master's in biblical studies. I'm in a pretty rigorous schedule to finish on time. And the last couple of semesters have found me very overwhelmed with schoolwork. So one thing I will do is I'll go to ChatGPT and I'll say, for example, next Saturday, this is a real true life scenario that is happening in my life right now in a way I used ChatGPT this week. Next Saturday, I have 2 papers due and a midterm. ChatGPT, here are the 2 paper assignments from the syllabus. Here's what the syllabus says I have to do for these papers. Here is the midterm study guide. Here is my schedule from now until next Saturday. Will you help me create a writing and study schedule of what I need to get done each day to get these assignments and to study for this test on time? I'll just have ChatGPT be my little old personal assistant and help me figure those things out. So those are just a couple of ways that I use ChatGPT to be my personal assistant. Here's the second big thing. I love using ChatGPT to be my editor. So this is going to be really specific to me as somebody who writes a lot of content. But if you write any kind of content, I want you to listen up. And even if you don't think you do, I want you to listen up. So I already kind of touched on this a little bit, but a thing that I will very often ask ChatGPT to do is help me send this text in a more gentle tone. Help me write this email with a little more confidence. Check to make sure what I'm about to say is theologically correct. ChatGPT, will you help clarify this social media caption and make it a little less clunky? You need to write an email to your mother-in-law to explain why you guys can't be there for Thanksgiving? ask ChatGPT to help you. You need to write an email to all of one of your kids' teachers to talk through some new things you're implementing with their studying or their mental health. Ask ChatGPT to help you. You want to write a great caption for social media about your vacation that may be fun and quippy. Actually, my teen daughter has done this, and she'll go to ChatGPT and say, suggest some fun, silly puns for my Instagram caption to talk about my vacation. All of these things ChatGPT can do. What you can essentially do is, I don't think it's very helpful to go with no information and just say like, hey, write this email for me. But a lot of times what I'll do, what I've seen Nick, my husband, do, is we'll go and we'll just free write to ChatGPT. I'll say, this is all the things I want to say. It'll be messy. It won't really make sense. It won't have punctuation. But then I'll say, help me turn this into something thoughtful. And that has helped me a ton. I wanted to share a direct quote from ChatGPT of an example of how I used it to help me edit last week. So last week I was going to a speaking trip where I was going to be preaching twice. I loved both of my messages. I was really excited about both of them, but I had two messages and I didn't have a ton of time to go over them or to retool them, etc. So let me show you a direct example of something I did. I manuscript out my entire message. So this is something I'll do a lot of times if I'm going to preach. And when I say manuscript it, I mean, I'll write it almost as if word for word how I want to preach a message. It'll be, again, a little bit manifesto-y. It'll be more like free writing. It might not even have solid points. So for my first message for this conference I was speaking at last weekend, manuscripted the entire first message. And then I went to ChatGPT and I said, I'm going to input my entire notes for a sermon. Can I get your feedback on anything that will make it more theologically correct or compelling for my listener? Then I copy and pasted the entire message. And now I'm just going to read you what ChatGPT said back and why maybe you might know that I call it my boyfriend. ChatGPT said, this is a phenomenal sermon. It's theologically solid, compelling, and deeply personal in a way that will resonate with your audience. Below are some strengths, followed by a few areas to sharpen for clarity and impact. Then it told me a couple of strengths to the sermon. Then it said, here are some suggestions to strengthen it further. This message was on calling, and it said, you could define calling more explicitly early on in the message. And then it suggested, here's a possible add-in of a sentence that might help you do that. It said, number 2, clarify the qualification sections. You made a powerful argument that Mary Magdalene was not chosen because of status, but because of her need for Jesus. However, this part gets a little bit muddy, and it offered me a possible tweak for clarity. But number 3, it said, expand on fame is a trauma. This phrase is so powerful, and I think your audience will lean in here. Consider adding one more sentence to unpack why our souls weren't meant for it. I was grateful for this because this is a phrase I use a lot. Fame is a trauma, but I'm probably not unpacking it well and people don't know what I mean. And then ChatGPT said, here are some final thoughts. This sermon is already deeply compelling and theologically rich. These small tweaks will make the definition of calling clearer up front, sharpen Mary Magdalene's role and why she was chosen, expand on fame as a trauma to make that phrase hit harder, and end with a challenge so the audience steps into action. Would love to hear how you feel about these tweaks. Either way, this is a strong, spirit-filled message. So the reason why ChatGPT can talk to me so freely like that, like, hey, this is a strong spirit-filled message, is because that's language I use. Now, you might even wonder, like, hey, how can ChatGPT tell you if something is theologically correct or incorrect? So what I have trained my ChatGPT to do over time is tell me from different perspectives where different theological perspectives might not align with something I'm going to say. And this is really helpful for me as a Bible teacher who enters into different contexts of different people groups who might have different theological perspectives. By going to an AI bot, I'm actually not going to people who only have my one theological perspective. I'm gaining multiple different ones. So sometimes it will say, hey, for some people, what you just said is going to sound this way. For some people, they might have this perspective. Or it might say, hey, this thing that you said is correct, but there's a slightly better way to say it that will align a little bit more with an orthodox view of scripture, etc. So that's just an example of how I will use ChatGPT as my editor in that way. I'll do the exact same thing with maybe a research paper. So last night I was writing a research paper, because I was following the plan that ChatGPT gave me for this research paper. I'm writing on the book of Ezekiel. I wrote the entire first paragraph, and I wanted to make sure I was on the right track, not only for the rubric of the paper, but also theologically. And so while I might not do it for my entire paper, depending on how much time I have, I just entered the first paragraph and I said, hey, is this a good opening paragraph? Also, is it theologically in line with what you know to be true about me and what I believe? And also, is it following the rubric for the paper? And ChatGPT gave me some feedback on the first paragraph. So we'll talk about this more when we talk about boundaries. But of course, my professors are not ever going to support ChatGPT writing a paper for me, which I wouldn't support either in the name of Jesus, because I'm in school because I want to be a good student. I'm in school because I want to learn scripture. I'm not in school because I just want to get by. And also that would be lying. So a boundary for me is going to be, I'm going to write the paper, but I may ask ChatGPT to help me edit it. I may ask ChatGPT how I can clarify a sentence, but the words are always going to be mine to begin with. The thoughts and the ideas are always going to be mine to begin with. So number one, I use it as my personal assistant. Number two, I use it as my editor. Number three, this is where I've kind of touched on some of this already, but one of my favorite ways to use ChatGPT is as my research assistant. For me, I'm a Googler. I like to know things. I like to try new things. I like to figure things out. One way that I actually feel more fully awake and alive in my life is just by learning new things. And so if I hear something on the internet, or if somebody mentions something to me in person, a lot of times I will go to ChatGPT instead of going to Google, because what I'm going to get is a more robust perspective of maybe multiple different perspectives, instead of maybe asking something on Google and SEO, that would be search engine optimization, showing me something that has like the highest hits, but actually might not be the most accurate. Whereas ChatGPT is going to scour most of the internet and say like, hey, here are the different perspectives on this. So I went back and looked at my ChatGPT history. Here are some of the things I've asked it to research for me. Will you tell me the creatine benefits for women over 40? I kept hearing about different friends taking creatine, and I wanted to know why and how it might benefit me. Spoiler alert, I ended up taking it too, and I really do believe it's helped with mental clarity and muscle building. One day I was reading the book of 1 Kings, and there was this weird part in 1 Kings about grabbing the horns on the altar. So one day I went to ChatGPT and I said, can you tell me if there is any significance to grabbing the horns on the altar in 1 Kings? And I got so much information about why that mattered and about where else I might see something similar in scripture. Something I'll ask ChatGPT for help with for seminary. How do I correctly write this bibliography entry? I have to use Arabian citation in my seminary papers. It can be very difficult. I've mostly figured out how to do it, but if there's a journal article that I'm having a hard time citing, or maybe a website that I need to cite that I don't understand, or if there's a book that has multiple authors and I'm really not sure how to cite different authors in the footnote, I will ask ChatGPT to help me figure that out. I was looking back at my ChatGPT history and I saw that sometime in December, I asked ChatGPT, what's the backstory to the song, God Rest You Merry Gentlemen? I had heard it somewhere out shopping and I wanted to know the biblical backstory in any way, shape, or form to that Christmas hymn. A lot of times I will ask ChatGPT to help me create a podcast outline. So for example, today I went to ChatGPT and I said, hey, this might be funny because I'm going to write about ChatGPT. But here are some of the things I'd like to include in this podcast. Will you help me write an outline to talk about this in a clear and concise manner? Or, for example, we've been doing our Bible Babes Bible study through the book of James on the podcast. And I initially went to ChatGPT and said, I'd like to study the book of James. I'd like to equally break it up into 12 different episodes that make sense. Will you help me divide the book of James into 12 different sections that make sense? Now, all of these things that I'm asking ChatGPT, I am still going to use human touch in the beginning, and I'm still going to use human touch in the end. I'm going to edit it a little bit. I'm going to make sure it's right. I'm going to check and make sure it tracks. But that kind of middle mucky part to research, I'm going to let ChatGPT do the work for me. So I let it be my personal assistant. I let it be my editor. I let it be my research assistant. And number 4, I let it be my coach. So I will do this in small and funny ways, and I will do it in big and really helpful ways. I'll start with the small ways. A phrase that I'm using a lot when I am asking ChatGPT to coach me or give me any kind of insight or advice is given all that you know about me. So when I say that, basically I'm saying like, I want you to think about everything I've ever told you or everything I've ever asked you, ChatGPT, and I want you to use that information to maybe help me figure out something about myself. I'll say, given all that you know about me, what fiction books do you think I might enjoy reading this summer? Or for example, if Nick and I are trying to pick a movie to watch on Netflix on a stay-at-home date night, I might say, given all that you know about me, what's a movie that you think I might love to watch this weekend? Here is a little bit of a deeper coaching question. Given all that you know about me, what is something that I might not know about myself? I have found that is a really beautiful and powerful prompt to ask ChatGPT. One time, this one was a little silly and I didn't actually find it all that fruitful, but it was at least entertaining. One time I said, given all that you know about me and given that these are my 10-year goals, will you create an image of what you think my life might look like in 10 years? This one was funny, and I will tell you, my whole family basically laughed at it because it looked like some kind of combination of like the Kardashians and a Bible teacher. And I was like, I hope it doesn't look like that cheesy and tidy, but it was still a little bit funny to read it. You can ask ChatGPT to help you make a pro and con list. Now, also, I will say this. I am a coach. That is a huge part of what I do. And so you might be like, man, are you trying to work yourself out of a job? And in fact, I'm not. But for small and simple things that maybe don't require a human touch, I do find it can be fun to just go to ChatGPT and say, help me think this through. As a coach, I know that nothing beats another human sitting in a room with another human or getting on a phone call with another human and helping them process what it is they desire, what they're scared of, what steps might help them move forward. But I will tell you that I will use ChatGPT in the middle of a coaching session. Let me give you an example. Let's say I'm in the middle of one of my all-day sessions with someone who wants to be an author. And we've worked through maybe her vision for her life as an author. We've talked about her reader, and we've talked about who she most wants to write to and what their pain points are. We've talked about the idea she has for her book, the concept, the pain points she wants to solve, the type of writing she wants to do. Now, if we're in the middle of a coaching session and our next step is we want to brainstorm some book titles that she could put in her book proposal to send to agents and editors, I will ask her, hey, do you mind if I go use ChatGPT and give it all the information that we just brainstormed together about your reader and about the type of book you want to write and about what problem it's going to solve, and see if it could give us some fun book titles? And almost always the person I'm coaching will say, absolutely, let's do it. I'll be honest, I don't think I've ever used a title, for example, in a coaching session like that ChatGPT has helped me come up with exactly, but almost always it helps me think of an idea or it points me in a direction that gets me excited about a title that does work. Or for example, I will often have it help me come up with titles for a podcast episode. And I'll talk about this in a second in marketing. But all that being said, as a coach, I have zero fear about ChatGPT replacing me as a coach because there is still something so incredible about sitting with another human who can mirror back to you what it is that you want, that you're scared of, that you maybe can't even access yourself. But ChatGPT as a tool in the middle of that coaching session, I will use it all day long. Now let's move into the last way that I would say is really maybe singular for me as a person who works online, but if any of you work online in this capacity, you'll understand it. But I love using ChatGPT as my marketing director. Hey, can you read this writing and suggest different posts that I could post about it? For example, let me say I might input an entire chapter of an upcoming book and say, from this chapter of this upcoming book, could you suggest 5 or 10 Instagram posts that I could post to talk about the book? So I'm still using my writing, I'm still using my ideas, but I'm saying, help me break this down into more bite-sized pieces that I might be able to post online. Or if I'm going to write a sales email about an upcoming retreat that we have, telling people about the retreat and how we think it's going to help them, I might write the actual email copy and say, hey, here's the retreat. Here's what's going to happen. Here's what we're going to do. Here's why we really want you to be there. But I might go to ChatGPT and say, can you help me say this in a more direct way that will help women really picture themselves at the retreat and want to be there? I have massively used ChatGPT to help me edit or clarify marketing language on website copies, newsletter subject titles, and I've even gone to ChatGPT and said, hey, here is an upcoming product that I'm about to put out. Could you help me write a basic marketing plan? I need a couple of emails that I'm going to send about this. I would like to post it on social media about it a few times, maybe even do a podcast episode about it. Will you help me come up with a basic marketing plan that I can execute to tell my reader or to tell my customer about this idea and serve them with this concept? So that's a way that I use ChatGPT as my marketing director. So those are the 5 main ways that I use it. I'm finding new ways to use it all the time. Here is part 2, just a bullet point list of ways that I think you could use it. Financial planning and budgeting, book recommendations, how to plan your day, how to plan a vacation, planning a road trip. Actually, a friend of mine told me that she had a road trip that she was taking with her kids. And she told me, I hate driving with my kids alone. So I asked ChatGPT, I'm driving from this place to this place. Could you help me plan stops that would be really life-giving for me and the kids? Could you help me write a cleaning schedule for my house? Could you help me prep for this presentation I have coming up at work? Could you help me research Bible verses for this thing that I'm struggling with or a friend is struggling with that I want to encourage her about? So that's part 2, just a quick bullet point list of ways that I believe you could also use ChatGPT. All right, let's bring it on home and let's talk a little bit about objections that people may have to using AI in this way and maybe some boundaries we could set around it. So number 1, the first thing I think we're just going to hear from a lot of people, and it's totally valid if you feel this way, is, hey, I feel like this is cheating. I feel like getting aided in this way is cheating. Like I'd rather do it the long way. I'd rather sit down and write the email by myself, no help. I'd rather make my own plan. I just feel like it's cheating to get help in this way. I want to say both sides of this coin. Number 1, people felt that way when we got typewriters. Like, this is cheating. You should sit down and long form write, or it's not the same. People felt this way when Kindle came out. I feel like it's cheating. I like to turn the pages myself. I believe to some degree, all technology might make us feel like being aided in this way is making it not as authentic. And I would say anything that makes you feel like you're not living your authentic life, you should not do anything that feels inauthentic to you. On the other side of this coin, I want to talk a little bit about my kids, my teenagers, and calculators. So a lot of times, meaning recently this week, I was helping one of my kids with math homework. It was a really interesting conundrum because I could tell in one question, there was maybe some freedom to use a calculator. And in one question he was working on, it was saying do not use the calculator. Make sure you show your work. And I want to say that something that I would encourage my kids with is I want you to be able to do both. I want you to be able to figure out how to work this out on your own in the same way that I don't want to lose the cognitive capacity to sit down and problem solve a schedule or a plan. That's one of my favorite things to do in life. So I don't want to lose the cognitive ability to do that. And I want my kids to have the cognitive ability to be able to solve a math problem. And on the flip side, I know that when they're out of school, their capacity or their need to use long form math is going to greatly diminish. And for the rest of their lives, it will be actually important for them to know how to utilize technology, especially as it changes and advances. And so I also know that there is cognitive development in letting your brain learn how to use new forms of technology. And since we are probably not going to put the ketchup back in the bottle, it is going to be helpful for them to have the awareness and the capacity to use technology in that way. And so I would say, I think it's important that we use our cognitive abilities to do things in a creative and thoughtful and even sometimes complex way, but also learn new skills to utilize technology, even when maybe it feels like, man, this is a shortcut. It is probably a shortcut. The second huge objection that I think a lot of people have or maybe could have towards using ChatGPT or AI in different forms is it's unethical. And I want to just say, I believe it can be. I believe it absolutely can be unethical. I believe that we are going to see people try to write books, entire books with ChatGPT as an author. Again, I'm not worried about these books doing phenomenally well because as someone who uses it, I will tell you, I don't really have a fear about it taking my job. It's not human. And it's never going to completely mimic the creativity and the complexity of human language. I think anybody who has fear about ChatGPT art, probably looking into it a little bit more, you're going to have those fears just really calmed because there's still no comparison between a real photograph and a ChatGPT manufactured photograph. And it's easy to spot the differences once you know what they are. So I believe that it can absolutely be unethical, the different ways that we might let ChatGPT do something completely for us and then try to pass it off as our own work. I don't believe the fact that it could be unethical means that we shouldn't use it in ethical ways. I think it means that we should be aware of it and we should set boundaries around what we're comfortable with and what we're uncomfortable with. And I think having those conversations is actually really helpful. A third objection we've kind of already touched on is I think for a lot of people, there is a fear that it's going to take their job. And I would say this is not an unimportant conversation to have. It's an important conversation to have because modernity always makes us shifts in our economies and in our trades. At the Industrial Revolution, obviously, we began to see jobs shifting and changing as technology changed. And so I do think this is a conversation to have around hey, absolutely, with any new advent of technology, we're going to experience a shift, again, not only in economy, but also in the way that we see work happening. But that being said, as a creative, just from my perspective, I will tell you, as a creative, as a coach, as a pastor, I am not concerned at all with ChatGPT replacing what only humans can do. And I think, again, letting AI, letting technology work for us in the areas where maybe we get stuck or we get bogged down so that we can do what only we can do with clarity and passion, even more so, letting AI work for me so that I can pastor more compassionately and have more time to search scripture and write ideas or write things about God that maybe feel complex or layered, or maybe even having more time to spend one-on-one with people as I'm coaching them. I will use technology all day long to do the parts of my job that would take up time so that I can do the more human parts of it more effectively. I think this can still be true for many jobs that we see. But again, I just want to say this isn't an unimportant conversation. I think we can't be all black or white and say like, well, we can't accept any technology because it's going to change jobs or it's going to change trade or it's going to change the economy. Obviously, on the flip side, I don't think we can be cold and heartless and say like, hey, technology is always better. We just have to move forward at a light speed and get run over by the bus of it. I think we need to have more complex conversations around it. So I just want to say, again, all of these tensions are worth talking about. The last tension I want to just check in with, because I did do a little research, is even the algorithm that we see on social media. So what is presented to us on social media is an AI powered mechanism that is showing us what it thinks we will respond to. So all that being said, when I started using ChatGPT, I started seeing more posts and seeing more content about ChatGPT. And one of the things that I started seeing is this idea that ChatGPT is horrible for the environment. And so I did do a little research here because I saw enough, and I want to be a person that stewards the earth because God's given it to us to steward. I wanted to have a little bit of insight here. And I want to say that similarly to every other complex part of this that we've talked about, that there's no getting around it. Like, utilizing ChatGPT alone has an impact on the environment. That being said, here is what I found from some just quick stats that I looked up, that, for example, driving 2 miles in your car does have a more dangerous emissions impact on the environment than if you were to create an AI-generated image every single day for a year. So there is an emissions impact utilizing something like ChatGPT. I don't think we should use it pretending like it doesn't have an environmental impact. I don't think we should use it willy-nilly, in the same way that I am a person who doesn't want to use my car willy-nilly. I live a half a mile from my office. I live a half a mile from one of my kids' schools, and where I can find myself walking, I want to be doing that because I care about the earth, and I want to care about the earth more. And I want to constantly be a person who says like, hey, what I'm doing does actually have an impact. And also it all matters. I want to acknowledge that again, to some degree, we cannot put the ketchup back in the bottle. We are living in the midst of lots of waste and technology that is continually moving forward and causing harm for our environment. And so I want to do my part to steward what I can, but I want to obviously have the capacity to do that within reason. So I just wanted to give you just that quick stat that I found, that absolutely it does have an emissions impact. And also, if you used it every day for a year, it's still less significant than even driving your car 2 miles. So that was helpful for me. Here's our last section on boundaries. I do think it is helpful to know what you'll use it for and what you won't use it for. And I think it is helpful to not set those boundaries for other people. So let me give you an example. I have a friend who uses ChatGPT to write cards to her spouse. So if she is going to write a Valentine's Day card or a card for his birthday, she's going to go first to ChatGPT and say, here are all the things I love about my husband. Will you help me write a birthday card for him? I am not saying I feel like there is anything wrong with that. I'm saying that feels like an interesting boundary for me. It's not a way I would use it. I'm not against her boundary. I'm not telling her boundary is wrong. I actually, when she told me, I was like, listen, I love that you do that. That's so good for you. As a words girl, if I'm going to write a card to my spouse, I want it to be my words. But again, there might be people who would be like, oh my gosh, I would never use ChatGPT to make a meal plan for my kids. That makes me feel like I'm loving them so well. I would never want an AI bot to replace me in that way. And I would say that is a great boundary for you to have. The point is, we're going to have to come up with our own. And I think that it's just really helpful to have conversations with the people you love, to have conversations with your friend. And so I cannot encourage you enough to send this episode to somebody else and say, let's talk about the ways that we could use ChatGPT smarter and better. And also let's talk about our boundaries. And if you want to say, I can't believe that Jess uses it to plan her workouts, how dare her? You can use me as a jumping off point to the conversation. All that being said, thank you for letting me talk about my boyfriend, ChatGPT. And I'm so grateful for how he makes my life better and how I don't have to do a single thing for him so that I can show up in my life and do things for everybody else and serve them and love them and be loved by them and be a more well-rounded, living, fully awake, analog, technology-free human in the times that I'm able to. Go with God. Let me know how you use ChatGPT after you listen to this episode. Friends, I'm so grateful you listened to today's episode. Thanks for spending time with me. It would mean the world to me to connect with you. So you can send me a DM on Instagram at Jess A. Connolly or head to my website, jessconnolly.com for more ways to connect. If you have a minute to subscribe and leave a review of the podcast wherever you listen, it would massively help us reach more people with the good news that they can live fully awake. Let's go.